please bear with me while I spend a minute or two gushing about one of my friends and bring him up here. But I first met Dave Kennedy at Black Hat. For those who don't know who I am, I have a day job, but as a side hustle, for the last 22 years, I've run all the technical operations for the Black Hat security briefing. So I run the NOC there. And Dave is and was a trainer at Black Hat. And Dave is what I would classify as a pain in the ass. And so when I first met him, it was because we have a bat phone in the NOC that rings when something is wrong or they need help in a classroom somewhere. And it would ring and someone would say, it's Dave Kennedy's class. Right? And we'd be like, okay. And we'd go down to the class, start, what is it this time? What do you need this time? He's like, well, this person's struggling, or the bandwidth is limited here. We're starting to get some latency here. I need this, or I need that. And we'd be like, okay, we'll take care of it. We're deploying new equipment. We're doing different things just to make sure that the class goes well. Now, I want to say this is not because Dave wanted to be a pain in the ass, but it's because he actually cared about the experience that his students were having. And I think if I was going to put like a bubble around Dave as a person, I would say he just cares about other people. And so these folks that were in his class, he was like, look, they've paid a lot of money to be here. They're far away from home. They're doing whatever. This is important to them. I just want it to go well. And that was true, whether there were 50 people in the class and 1 or 2 people were struggling or their laptop wasn't working or whatever. He would be like, what do I need to do? Can someone go buy them whatever equipment it is? I'll pay for it out of my own pocket. Let's just make sure that it's going well for them. Including at the end of the class, sometimes we get a call where he'd say, can we stay for a little while longer, 30 minutes, an hour? What can you give us? Because there's somebody in the class who didn't grasp a concept. And he wasn't leaving that room until everybody understood what it was that they came to learn that day or those days, right? So that's Dave. I mean, it was, for us, like being in the NOC, it means staying there later, running around, bringing additional equipment, doing whatever. But he also pushed us to be better because of what he wanted to do for his students and what he wanted to do for that class. It made us better at what we were doing because we knew there was a standard that we had to meet. And so we continued to push to make sure that we were meeting that standard. It does, I will say, make it a little bit easier when the person who's asking for those things wrote the programs that you use, like in your daily life and your career, wrote the books that you read to help you elevate yourself. So it was like, all right, well, it's Dave. So yeah, we'll deal with it. Okay, great. But that was the thing about Dave as well, is that despite all of those accomplishments, despite the things that he had done, he was incredibly approachable. And there was no ego there. And I got to know him better as I started to attend a little conference that he put on in Louisville called DerbyCon. I'd go out to DerbyCon and we'd actually get time to spend hanging out instead of just working. And I think one of the things that I loved about Derby is also one of the things I love about SAINTCON, which is that it feels like family, right? Like we come and we get to hang out and we meet in the hallway. And a parallel between Derby and SAINTCON is that the organizers are out there, like talking to people. They're visible. They're having conversations, taking selfies with you. So, you know, Troy and Dave share that, where they're out there meeting you and talking about what can we do to make this better? How can we, improve the conference that you have a better experience? And despite accomplishments and all those things, Dave remained approachable with no ego, no rock star mentality. And I love that. Like, I just love that about him as a person. Also, if you saw my keynote a few years ago, when I was at Derby, I drank a roach. Dave was there. So thanks for that. Little buddy. And the thing about that conference as well was that it was focused similar to here. Again, it feels like this, where it was friends, family, coming together, giving back to each other, giving back to charity. And Derby was one of the first the first conference to have a mental health village, right? To recognize that there were things outside of technology that we struggle with, right? That we struggle with our mental health. And once we were addressing those kind of things, or around that same time, Dave was like, oh, so we've got the technology covered. We're working on the mental piece. Maybe we should focus on the physical as well. Hackers, by and large, or at least the stereotype for us, tend to be on the larger side. And so that improvement that was pushed for technical, for mental, then became a mission of Dave's to make us healthier. And he started saying, all right, well, I'll start with me, and spent time bettering himself and then sharing it, right? And that was different, like to see somebody that we respected, and it was like, I'm not happy with how long I will live if I continue to live this way. And so I'm going to tell you what I'm doing to try to make myself better, and how you can do it too, and share, again, that knowledge. The same thing he was doing with technology, he was now doing to try to make hackers healthier and to live better lives, like more fulfilled lives. So Dave was a really big guy, and he's still a really big guy, just in different ways. And so the only thing probably bigger than Dave's arms are his heart. So please welcome to the stage one of my close personal friends and a hacker among hackers, Dave Kennedy.
Well, I don't think we really need a keynote after that, to be honest with you. That was great. Thank you. Those arms, is that what you said? All right, give me 2 seconds here. All right, I think we're all ready to go. Look at that. All right, hey, first of all, I just want to say a special thanks to Grifter for coming up and talking. He's been a great friend throughout these years, and always dealing with all the craziness that is Black Hat. And you know, it's interesting that today's talk is a bit unusual for me because it's not going to be a heavily technical one, although all my talks, I always throw technical stuff in there, of course, because I can't not do that. But this talk to me is a special one because when I came into this industry, you know, nobody knew who Dave Kennedy is. And it's weird when people go into like, oh, you're Dave Kennedy, because I don't see myself like that in any way, shape, or form. I'm just a person. I've had a lot of successes, but I have different stories. And that's really what we are in this industry is different stories. Every person here has a unique story. And those stories, those struggles, those things that you experienced are things that craft you to who you are today. And those are extremely, extremely valuable. At DerbyCon, we created this track called New to InfoSec. And the prerequisite was you never have given a presentation before. And we wanted people to come out of their shell and share experiences they had they maybe didn't think was valuable. And I'll tell you, I sat in those talks. They were only 30-minute talks. And I sat in those talks and I learned so much more than the latest and greatest hack that was out there today, because these were new kids coming into cybersecurity, learning things completely different than I did, doing things differently than I did. And the talk today is really about how do we capture those same types of creativities. Everybody here is experiencing that, the same type of creativity that we see from these kids coming up, and applying that to doing something different in this industry. You'll see some of my origin stories here and some old school discussions around how I kind of started in cybersecurity. But what always interested me about hackers in general was their creativity and how they approach things differently. And when you look at this industry, we have a formalized industry now. When I first got into this industry, in the late 90s, we didn't have really a formal industry. It started to become called information security. Then it changed to cybersecurity. And we all hated that, by the way. We hated the word cyber. We still do to this day. So when we say cyber, it kills us inside, to be honest with you. So it's still information security to most of us. And the spirit of what folks were doing, you look at what Mudge did when he wrote, essentially the first prototype for a Stack Overflow, smashing the Stack for fun and profit, the frack articles. We were an industry that was just exploring and trying things different. We had no idea that it would turn into what we see today. And I'm not saying me as part of that. I was, watching the Shmoo Group and Cult of the Dead Cows and all these folks coming out, with like, outfits and skulls and things like that. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? This is awesome. And that creativity is something that we need to make sure that we hold really dearly to ourselves and we continue to do, because what has been done today doesn't mean it's the same of what's going to be for tomorrow. Tomorrow holds every endless opportunity that we ever possibly could have imagined. The way that we do things today is not the way we should be doing things tomorrow. We've made a lot of innovations. We've done a lot of great things. Security has gotten substantially better from 25 years when I first started. And I remember I was talking to Chris Gates about this, Cardinal Onage, while I was HackinFest a couple of weeks ago. And we were talking about how when we used to go on engagements and do, let's just say, a penetration test or things like that, and everybody would always ask me, like, hey, how do you get so much done? How are you able to write the social engineer toolkit or Magic Unicorn or the pen testers framework or write a book, Metasploit? Or be on the backtrack development team or, exploit DB team, you do all this stuff and yet you still have a normal job. Well, back then, literally you'd go on a penetration test and the first day you'd break into everything and you'd have like 2 weeks on site. So you'd spend the next 2 weeks like prototyping your next tool and testing it on a production environment. It was amazing. And I'll tell you a funny story. Me and one of my good friends that works at TrustedSec, Justin Elzy, we were doing an assessment for a country and then an entire country, and their centralized IT infrastructure ran the entire government. I'm talking like hospitals and, airplanes and, energy production, you name it, like the IT infrastructure for everything for the specific country. And Justin and I we had already broken in everything, and I'm running a new tool. I'm testing it out. It was using a different way of doing like pass the hash at the time. And I was testing it, and all of a sudden the entire country goes out, like total outage. And I look at Justin and I'm like, dude, none of this should have broken anything. Like everything should be fine. And we see people start running back and forth or screaming. And it's a different language. And all you can hear is da-da-da-da-da, TrustedSec. Da-da-da-da-da, TrustedSec. They're screaming. And I'm like, oh man, what's going on here? We're sweating like, hey, we're never gonna make it out of this country. Turns out one of the networking folks pushed a change out that encrypted all their network traffic, which shut down the whole country. And it wasn't us. But, the prime minister was there. They're screaming. This is like security detail. There's people posted outside of our rooms, we're like terrified of this, right? But that was the excitement and fun because we were always doing something new. And I feel like today we get so many different distractions that really don't allow us to be as creative as we would before. And plus security's gotten a lot better. You go into an organization and if you want to do a penetration test, unless you're doing something like an assumed breach, you got to bypass, EDRs and endpoint security products and their monitoring detection programs and all of these different things that take a lot more time and effort than the first day going to break in and then writing tools for the rest of it. And so one of the things that this talk is really going to be about is focusing on the importance of creativity and making sure that we continue to have that hacker spirit with everything that we're doing. Before we start, I just want to thank SAINTCON for having me and all you folks here for being here, because this is really what it's all about. The community, people coming together, sharing their experiences, and being better. So Troy, everybody else that makes this possible, all the volunteers, let's give a round of applause really quick for them. So I'm going to start off with this quote here from a good friend of mine who unfortunately passed away from pancreatic cancer last year, Kevin Mitnick. Kevin was a controversial individual. 90s was one of the number one most wanted hacker by the FBI, and was an interesting individual. Kevin was driven by basically breaking in. If you ever worked on an engagement with Kevin, the guy would obsess about every engagement he was on. And up until his last days, he came over to my house a week before he passed because he was at a hospital locally in Pittsburgh, and was asking me from my latest cracking list that I had for my GPUs. So, I had an external hard drive I gave to him literally a week before he passed. So up until his last minutes, all he could think about was hacking and cybersecurity. And this is what this industry to me is about. When I first wrote the tool, the social engineer toolkit, it was a fun tool that I kept building up on and continued to grow and continued to be used for doing assessments and things like that. I got an email from Kevin Mitnick, and he's like, "Hey man, just want to say nice job working on this tool. It's really cool." And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Is this like Kevin Mitnick? Like the Kevin Mitnick that I knew from the 90s and growing up as a kid? And I responded back. I'm like, hey, thanks, man, ... Is this really you? And he's like, yeah, here's my phone number. Give me a call. And I was like, what? Okay. So I called up Kevin Mitnick, and from there we became really good friends. Similar interests, similar passions. And, I remember one time I was working on an engagement with Kevin, and it was 2:00 in the morning, and I was so close to getting access to a machine that it was like a race. We're like basically going after each other to see who's better than one another. And it was like 2:00 in the morning. I'd been up for like 27 hours, and I was like, all right, I'm going to bed. So I go to bed, and like an hour later, I get a text message from Kevin like, hey, I got in. I'm like, oh, come on. He was always one of those great guys. But what had changed from 25 years ago to today is that the importance of our roles in cybersecurity today is vastly different than it was 25 years ago. Not that it wasn't important 25 years ago, but I mean, technology is literally innovating everything that we do today. I mean, everything from implantable devices to our next generation of products and lines, medical facilities, research, you name it. We're embedded, cybersecurity is embedded into literally every aspect of civilization. If technology goes away today, there is no civilization. I mean, financial information, banks, energy, everything is automated, everything is technological, and we play such a critical role in making sure that all of this stuff works as anticipated. And so when we look at today, I want to flash back a little bit just to what really got me excited about cybersecurity. I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to give you folks what has made me successful in cybersecurity. Hopefully that you can do the same thing. And again, everybody's story is different, but people have different origin stories as we go along. For me, I grew up in a great parents, great family, but lower class. The place that I lived in was a net median income under 30,000 or less, well below the poverty line. A place called Bedford High School, and I recently built a K-12 cybersecurity program, which I'll talk a little bit about here in a few for Bedford. But what's interesting is I moved from place to place to place because my parents would find a new job, move to that location, and so I never really had a school that I had a lot of friends with. I was bullied a lot, whatever, it happens. And, I found my home in computers. And we had these amazing things like multi-user dimensions and, text-based games. Those were the best for me. Those were just so much fun. Being able to go online and just have a handle, and I didn't have to be somebody at school. In fact, I failed out of high school because I was always at home. I literally called the teacher, pretend to be my dad, and then say, hey, he's staying home from school. And then my dad finally found out I had 34 absences or something like that. And I got in trouble, but it was worth it. And then he beat my ass in the snow. That's another story. In his robe, he got a robe on, and it was and then he beat my ass. It was cold out. Anyways. So for me, computers were what I found my life in, right? My hobbies, my interests, everything else started coming into there. And I really started to enjoy what the future held, because the future was bright with technology. And I saw this movie, Back to the Future, which I know there's a debate on which one's better. No one likes Back to the Future 3 the most. That's a weird. If you're weird, you're weird if you do. But Back to the Future 1 and 2 is always a debate. Everybody's like, oh, 1 traditional. But 2 for me was the promise of the future, right? Technology, flying cars, hoverboards, which we still don't have today, which is ridiculous. For crying out loud, somebody can please admit hoverboards. We were promised hoverboards. But Back to the Future 2 for me was a promise of the future. And I actually own, that's my DeLorean, by the way. I own a converted Back to the Future DeLorean that shoots fog out and stuff. And it's all programmable. So you can do the time circuit programming. And then once it hits 80 miles per hour, the whole car lights up, the flux lights up. And then it has missing plutonium sounds. If you're ever in Cleveland, more than welcome to take a peek. I'll drive you around in it. I'm actually putting a LS3 supercharged engine in it right now. So, and hit 88 miles per hour. If you don't know anything about DeLoreans, they're horrible cars, horrible cars, the worst cars ever built, but they look really cool, obviously. My car, when I'd be driving down the road, I would be thinking I was going to die, going 50 miles an hour, let alone 88. In fact, in the movie, the speedometer didn't actually go to 88 miles per hour. They had to put a fake one in there, and then they put a Porsche engine in because the engines were so crappy back then, there was no way it was ever going to hit 88 miles per hour. And fun fact about Back to the Future is that it was never supposed to be a DeLorean. It was actually going to be a refrigerator. So Doc Brown was going to build a time machine out of a refrigerator, but then the producers were like, hey, we don't want kids going in refrigerators and trying to go back in time and then dying in the refrigerator. So they're like, hey, we're just going to make it a DeLorean. Better. So anyways, I learned a lot with Back to the Future. And, I'm a big kid. I actually own the original almanac that Michael J. Fox used in the movie. And I actually have the original hoverboard that was used in the movie as well. Which is pretty cool. So if you ever come to Trusted Sec, we got a Back to the Future museum there that you can come and see, and I'll let you hold the hoverboard. So it's actually really heavy. It's like plywood, and that's the one where he ripped off the little thing from the little girl. Like, little girl, can I borrow this? And then that was the hoverboard that I was able to snag. So I started getting interested in technology, and I saw this awesome movie called Hackers. And I understand people are like, hey, that movie's totally fake. Yeah, of course it's fake. Okay, yes, they didn't. There wasn't the Gibsons and things like that with magical floating, viruses and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the culture of Hackers was there, in my opinion, right? Hack the Planet. If you notice, Trusted Sec's logo looks very similar to the hack, the hackers theme for Dade Murphy specifically. And for me, Hack the Planet has always been a motto of free and open information and people collaboratively and sharing information together to do things that are better. And so once I hit hackers, I'm like, well, the first thing I need to do is figure out how to be a hacker. So I go and I join IRC, right? That was a bad mistake at first. I'm like 16 years old, and this kid's like, I'm like looking for the source code for a multi-user dimension. I wanted to build my own MUD. And so I'm in one of the IRC chat rooms, and I'm like, hey, does anybody have the source code for this MUD? I'd like to be able to play with it and mess with it and start to teach myself some C, C++. And the guy's like, hey, yeah, here, download this telarena.exe. Sounds good. I'm like, all right, cool. And I go and I download this telarena.exe, and all of a sudden my CD-ROM drive's popping up and everything. And the guy's like, hey, messing with you, everything's good. Well, that got me obsessed with the hacking industry in general. And from there, I was sold. Like, I knew that I wanted to be in cybersecurity, and I knew that I wanted to learn everything about it. And I started obsessing about it, whether it was taking apart computers, teaching myself how to program. There was no tutorials. There was no, SANS courses. There was no offensive security courses. It was going on and looking at FRAC articles. I remember one of the times when I was learning about data execution prevention or circumventing data execution prevention. There was an experimental, like a research paper done on the possibilities of bypassing DEP. And at that time, there had not been an exploit that was written that circumvented DEP at the time, Microsoft's preventative mechanisms for marking a stack read-only. And so I decided to plunge into this. I remember spending 3 weeks down in my basement, just understanding, what DEP was, how it worked, and then how I could figure out ways around it. And I remember building what's called, I guess, ROP gadgets now, so return-oriented programming widgets, and I didn't know what it was at the time. There was no articles on this, and was able to circumvent DEP and write one of the first exploits of circumventing data execution prevention based off of a FRAC article. And it's like those types of things that has always, interested me, is figuring out problems that I'd never done before. And I started to see a lot of these folks in the industry doing the same thing. Like, you look at Cult of Dead Cows, you look at, Loft Industries, Shmoo Group, Epic folks, Kevin. If you notice the top right corner there, that's Alexis Park. That pool's very notorious. But, there's so many different things that these folks were doing that I just latched onto this industry and really wanted to become a part of it. And so at that time, the future was unwritten, and yet the hacking industry was such a weird group of people. And that was the cool thing about it, was it didn't matter who you were or where you came from or your upbringing or the color of your skin or what language you spoke or anything else. We were all just a handle online, and we were all trying to figure out cool new things to do and to be innovative to create this thing called cybersecurity. And again, I'm not saying I created cybersecurity or part of that. A lot of the folks came before that, did all of that. But I was able to say these folks are brilliant and amazing. I remember seeing a Shmoo Group presentation, and Bruce was up on stage, and I remember it was at Alexis Park with the tents, and there was a UPS there, and they built basically a way to plug in the network cable from the computer back to this UPS, and they would send a C2 back out so you can compromise the organization from an implant perspective. And I'm like, wow, these guys are amazing. Like, I'll never figure out how to be like these folks, right? And I was so obsessed with figuring out how they do things and how they build things that I started just to build my knowledge from a foundational standpoint and continuing to do it. And then from there, once you saw these folks doing this, the industry was really born. Like, the industry started off from literally just a bunch of hackers in a basement to creating just these eccentric groups to really an industry saying, hey, we actually have to protect ourselves, and start to move from there. And then obviously came, the things that we see today with cyber warfare and these landmine fields and ransomware and everything else that we talk about today. But really, ransomware wasn't a thing at all. I made one of the most amazing predictions ever in cybersecurity history about 10 years ago. I said ransomware was just going to be a fad. It would go away. And I was so right, man. Awesome. Whew, man, I messed up in that one. But I didn't realize the amount of money that was available to do this, right? The investment in weaponization and tooling, the ability to build an infrastructure out, to offer out to the masses, so you have, one or two really skilled folks that can sell it to less sophisticated groups that could then create kind of an army of people going out and doing these types of things. So I didn't see the investments that these different groups were going to make into themselves to then become bigger and bigger. We had some interesting groups. You had LulzSec and a few others come out at the time that were mostly for the lulls and breaking things out. Do you remember the Lapsus group that came out a few years ago? A bunch of 16-year-old kids out of the UK. like took out LG and Uber and a bunch of others. Like the Uber one's one of my favorite examples of like cybersecurity fails in general. And I'm not saying Uber doesn't have a great security program, by the way. I mean, it's just literally anybody could fall to this exact same type of attack. But these kids, these 16-year-old kids bought like credentials from an Uber contractor that had been phished for like $17 online. And then they started spamming the guy for the VPN concentrator, and they had push notifications, and the guy kept hitting deny, 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 deny. But 17 times later, he had allowed these 16-year-old kids into Uber's environment because they, because of push notifications and how it's designed. So you look at how cybersecurity has evolved, and what I find really interesting is that we've shifted away from the day-to-day trying to patch every single system. It's important. But we focus more on what the attackers actually do and the patterns of attack that they actually exhibit and try to build defenses against it. And that's a huge shift that has made things a lot easier for us. Now, when you look at this industry itself, it was born from people doing creative things. And this industry will continue to move forward with people doing amazing things. And honestly, most of the innovation that comes from this industry, whether it's coming from a company like CrowdStrike or SentinelOne or Logarithm or QRadar or ArcSight. Well, no one really uses ArcSight anymore. Never mind. No offense. So a lot of things change, but the people that work at these companies are the people that are innovating every single day and becoming creative. The community's still there. We just work for companies now. And people are doing amazing things. They're not necessarily sharing as much as they used to because either A, it'll burn the technique or tools. So we have groups that still do that. But at the same time, this industry is still there. This community is still there. It's just a little bit different. And so the Hacking Dave you know today is not what it was supposed to be. I never thought I would be up on stage giving a keynote. Heck, I was terrified of speaking in front of people, just in general. I'll tell you a funny story. Just recently, I was on the news. I was on CNBC, and I'll tell you the first story, and then I'll tell you the second story because it probably isn't to both. But I was on a different news organization, and you know when you go into a news organization, you speak in front of folks. I don't get nervous anymore because I'm literally just kind of staring at a camera, and I don't really think about people that are watching the TV show itself. And I was getting introduced, and it was for the Iranian stuff that was going on with their nuclear program, as well as their capabilities from a cybersecurity perspective. And so I was coming in as a cybersecurity expert, and they had a person before me that was coming in as a nuclear arms expert. So I know nothing about nuclear arms or technology, and I know nothing about that, like literally nothing. Like I watched that one Oppenheimer. That was a good movie. That's about my extent to any type of like nuclear technology, right? Whatever's in that movie is about all I know. And I go on the news, and they introduce me on accident. So they skipped the first segment, and they introduced me as Dave Kennedy, the nuclear arms expert, which is fine. Like any normal person would be like, "Hey, I'm the cybersecurity person," but I panicked, and I started sweating like everywhere, like my nose, my ears. Like I didn't know you can sweat like that. I was drenched. So I'm like, what do I do? So I started panicking. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a nuclear arms expert today. And she's like, well, so the nuclear arms treaty of 1982. I'm like, I have no idea what that is. States, blah, 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 blah. What do you think? I'm like, well, yeah, it's obviously really unfortunate what's going on over there, but the cyber stuff should be, so I tried directing it more towards cyber. And the news anchor's like, Dave, thank you so much, but we have a cybersecurity expert coming up next that's going to be talking about the cyber stuff. And I'm like, I'm the cyber guy. And so I think that I've gotten that one scrubbed off the internet, but literally that's one of the worst things I've ever had to experience in my entire life. Well, it just happened again last week. The whole 2 weeks ago, the Israeli pager stuff that was going on. So I came in to talk about the supply chain stuff, and I got introduced as a C2 bombs explosive expert, which I'm smarter this time. I was like, no, I'm the cyber person. I know nothing about explosives. So let's talk about the cyber stuff. She's like, okay, cool. It sounds good. That would have been great for that first one, right? But you live and learn the mistakes that you make. And my origin story is a little bit different. When I got out of high school, I had to literally go to summer school just to pass. So I had like D's and F's and things like that because I never went to school. I didn't care. I was always focused on computers. I was building MUDs. I was programming video games. I was focusing on hacking. And I went to the military, and I was in the U.S. Marines in the intelligence side. And believe it or not, Marines do have intelligence as well. I know like you think of like Air Force are smart, Marines not smart, crayons and stuff. Like we actually have like smart people apparently. How I got into there, I have no idea. But the reason I joined is because like I was gonna have a top secret clearance. And I was like, well, if I have a top secret clearance, maybe I'll know if there's aliens or not. I was like, they're out there. Trust me, they're out there. But with the alien thing, I told my buddy Sean, who's my best man at my wedding, I'm like, Sean, dude, if I call you up at like 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, hey, it's real. And I hang up. There's aliens. Never made that call, unfortunately. But I deployed multiple times to Iraq for intelligence-related missions. This is actually me in one of the Ba'ath Party houses when we had invaded Saddam Hussein's palace ground. And so this is like literally like 500 yards from Saddam's palace. And we were basically collecting any type of electronic evidence, forensics analysis, things like that, to see if we could track, some loyalists and things like that. But once I was in the military, when I was about to come out after my second tour, I did 2 tours in Iraq. So I spent about 2.5 years in the Middle East, Bahrain, Afghanistan, and Iraq twice. When I was getting out, I was looking at, hey, how do I was at that point, I was kind of burned out in the whole like war stuff. It's not a great time. And I was like, hey, I'm going to get out and join the private sector. And I started hanging out in this group called Remote Exploit, which was the folks that started creating Backtrack Linux and Kali Linux and everything else. And I became good friends with Maddie Arhoni, who started offensive security and everything else. This is my wife on your left, me on the right, and then Mutz in the middle. And what I can't emphasize enough is people that are already established in this industry or that have years of experience. It is so important for us to teach the newer generation of folks coming in and to mentor them as they're coming in, because they're so much smarter than us, by the way, in many ways. But second, we owe it to ourselves to continue to build on what we do, because they're going to create things that no one else has done. And I'll tell you, when I joined the Remote Exploit group, Mutz was one of the most inspirational people that I can literally single-handedly count on one hand that helped me build my career. I'm like, hey, Mutz, what's the first programming language I should do to write this tool? He's like, oh, Python all the way. And so I'm like, okay, I'll just learn Python. And I started writing. The first tool I ever wrote was a tool called Fast Track. And it was an exploitation framework for automating, I think the very first iteration of Fast Track was it literally automated DB Autopwn. So it nmap scanned something and import the list into DB Autopwn and run all the exploits against the systems, whether it was client side or localized. Real simple at first, then it got a little more crazy. From there, though, I was able to speak at my very first conference, which was at SMUCON, and it was a talk called Let's Pop a Box. And it was just demo after demo of breaking into something in a new way, which is really cool and a lot of fun. And I joined the Backtrack development team and helped with that. Mutz was really set on anybody remember the old IWAX or WAPX, or even I think the first iteration of Backtrack was still Slackware, which is a horrible distribution to make a mass distribution that needs to be updated all the time with. So we finally talked Mutz into moving to Debian and do package management repositories. And then I was able to speak. This is one of my favorite talks, and it's all blurry intentionally. But this was at the Penn and Teller room at DEF CON. And this is one of my favorite talks. And I'm surprised I didn't get in a lot more trouble for what I did. But it was called Owning One to Rule Them All. All right. And we found this bug in SCCM that allowed you to basically upload instruction sets to SCCM to patch the whole company with malware. Okay. So you'd use SCCM as a deployment method for all of your malware. And I'm like, well, at the time I was the chief security officer at Diebold. How I got that, just a whole other story. But I was 26 years old, and I was going into Diebold, and I'm like, well, listen, I'm just gonna patch Diebold's production network with malware live on stage. It's gonna be awesome. And so literally, it's me on stage. I have heavy metal blaring with a lighter, and then you just see thousands of shells raining down on the screen. It was one of the best moments of my life. Like you just see literally thousands. Diebold had I think 20,000 employees, like 20,000 shells on the screen. It just kept going. Heavy metal's blaring. Everybody's clapping and cheering. Such a cool highlight there, right? And then from there, I started a little conference called DerbyCon. But what's interesting is at that same time, I started my first company, Trusted Tech. And it was a company that I started in the basement of my house. My wife had just had twins. Great time to start a new company, by the way, let me tell you. We had 6 months of rent in the bank, so I needed to bring money in or else we were going to foreclose on our mortgage. And so this is our first booth that we had. And I think it was like a $3,000 booth, which was like a ton of money for us at that time. And my buddy Ryan there was helping me build it. It's like one of those booths that's like takes 20 minutes to set up. It took us 4 hours. and we're like dripping in sweat as we did it, but it was one of the first boosts we did. And from there, I continuously started building up Trusted Second, adding more folks and amazing people, and eventually started Binary Defense and a bunch of others. And so what you see today is a different person than when I first started in this industry. I was really fortunate. I got to speak, or I got to help out the TV show Mr. Robot with Rami Malek and Christian Slater. Funny story about that. First of all, how the hell did I ever work on with Rami Malek and Christian Slater? I had no idea. I remember when they first started Mr. Robot season 1, and I was on the phone with Christian Slater and the whole cast. And Christian Slater was terrified of representing hackers. He's like, am I going to get hacked now? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't speak for this hacker collective of like what's going to actually happen if you decide to portray hackers. Like, I'm like, we're not like one body that like has judges and rules and stuff like that. Like, you know, we're kind of a motley crew bunch here. And he's like, well, can you provide me some sort of like hacker shield to protect me? I'm like, man, you watch way too many movies. Seriously. Like there's no hacker shield I can help you out with here. So that was fun to be able to work on the stunts and skits there. I was actually in a Chris Brown rap video, which was really fun. Believe it or not, no idea again how I got that. Testified in front of Congress and a bunch of others. And, you know, the story goes from there. The truth of the matter is, though, that anybody here can be anything that they want to in this industry. If you're just starting off in cybersecurity, my biggest advice to you is making cybersecurity your hobby. And I don't mean sitting there and working 20 hours a day or anything like that. I'm not saying that you need a good balance. What I'm saying is if you find that you have a niche for cybersecurity, making your hobby, success comes with that. Like I would be on airplanes programming because I wanted to figure out something cool or new, or because I remember one time I was working on something and, you know, it was buggy, man. I couldn't get it to work. I was like inline process memory injection for PowerShell or something. I couldn't get it to work. There's no, you know, blog post or anything like that. It's something new that I was doing. And I spent like 2 weeks on it. I couldn't get to work. And I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning and had the answer, you know, and I wrote the answer down on a piece of paper. And the next day I coded it out. Like that was my hobby and things that I enjoyed doing to really continuously try something innovative and new that hadn't been done before. And I got a really cool title. Jeff Snover, who wrote PowerShell, the father of PowerShell, I guess, he considers me the father of PowerShell security, which is a cool title to have, by the way. But you know, I didn't think about it from the perspective of PowerShell is going to become this massive programming language in all the operating systems. We just had a Microsoft rep that came in and was like, hey, we're looking at this new scripting language that we're going to be adding into Windows. I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. Let's figure out how we can break it. And that turned into the first PowerShell security talk called PowerShell OMFG. And that started the whole kickstarting of what we see now from a PowerShell exploitation framework. So let's fast forward to today and why we're here today. And what's interesting is we've progressed a lot, but we've stalled a bit. And what I mean by that is when you look at what we had to defend against 10 or 15 years ago, it was a lot of 0 days. It was heavily sophisticated attacks that we would consider today. Now, if you get hit by a 0 day today, automatically it's going to be associated usually to an APT group like North Korea or China or Iran or whomever, right? Because they're far and few in between. The security mechanisms have gotten better. But when we see breaches today, it's not coming from usually a 0 day or something highly sophisticated. It's coming from the same types of attacks that have been around for 10 or 15 years. We just missed it. And so when I say we've gotten better in many ways, we've also gotten weaker in many ways. We've stalled in our innovation of how we look at unusual behavior in our organizations. And what I mean by that is, you know, we rely very heavily off of commoditized tools and products. We usually go and we try to purchase technology to fix specific gaps in our security programs. Is security an easy thing? Absolutely not. Does anybody here feel like they don't have enough meetings in their life? We all get nailed with meetings every single day. We feel like we're not progressing in anything because we're always putting out fires or some new security initiative. And security programs in general take a long time to implement because you have to touch every aspect of a business. And I'm sure everybody's business here is perfect. You're running everything up to date. You don't have any legacy systems. Everything's perfectly segmented. You know, you don't have any problems with patch management or ownership in those different weird tiers like APIs and third-party applications and things like that. I'm sure everybody's perfect security program, a great governance program. Everybody loves cybersecurity. IT and security work together perfectly. Everything's great, right? However, those things take a long time to actively go and implement, right? You look at vulnerability management, probably one of the most complex security programs that we have because we have to figure out who owns everything from a technology standpoint. We have to figure out how we're going to patch it. Then we have to like figure out exceptions and who's going to own the risk, which is how are you going to give a business person risk? Anyway, long story. But we have all of these complexities that we have to deal with. So we build these long programs that take 3 to 5 years. So anybody have a three-year roadmap, cybersecurity roadmap? Is it done in 3 years? No, it's just 3 years for the next 3 years, and then 3 years for the next 3 years, and 3 years for the next 3 years, and 3 years for the next 3 years. So you're always doing a bunch of stuff in cybersecurity. And while we're trying to fix our security problems, we're not understanding the organization and business and the behaviors that our companies exhibit. And so we really struggle. So the question I have today, and this is the reason why I pose this question, is I'm going to show you a video that I did on CNBC recently. It's about the MGM, Caesars, Ticketmaster breaches that were on there. And the news anchor asked me, David, MGM has a cybersecurity program, don't they? Yeah. Caesars, they have a cybersecurity program, don't they? Yeah. Ticketmaster has a cybersecurity program, don't they? Yeah. She asked me, well, is cybersecurity working? I was like, whoa, that's a good question. Is it actually working? Is what we're doing actually working? And it took me a second. I mean, yes, I think it's working. I'm not saying out of 2,000 people here, cybersecurity is not working. But it takes a step back to say, could we be doing things better, right? So my question for today is cybersecurity actually working? And I'm going to show you just a quick, it's like 2 minutes just of a CNBC video that did. Now, funny story on this is that I'm never wearing pants. I feel like they're uncomfortable while you're on TV. So just know I'm not wearing pants right now.
Indeed, in recent months, a barrage of cyber attacks have plagued companies, with hackers breaking into the digital vaults of United Health Group, the auction house Christie's, and MGM in Vegas. In each case, the hackers demand big ransoms or threaten to inflict bigger damage. And on Thursday, as we mentioned, a notorious hacker group called Shiny Hunters claims it breached the data of 560 million Ticketmaster users globally in a recent cyber attack, according to multiple reports. Joining us to talk about that and what's going on more broadly, Dave Kennedy, co-founder and chief hacking officer of Binary Defense. Dave, it's good to see you again. And do they just keep getting bigger? What's going on here?
Well, I think you're seeing a lot of success with these ransomware groups. You know, you look a few years ago and they were maybe getting 100,000, 200,000 type of payouts. And they've moved to much larger organizations, like you saw United, MGM, Caesars, and the payouts are astronomical. Alfie, one of the largest groups reportedly out of Russia, is estimated to have over $300 million in ransomware payments alone. So they're making a ton of money going after larger organizations. And that money then is then put into more sophisticated attacks. So they build better weapons to attack these organizations and companies. They're more efficient in what they do. They get affiliates that help them go after these big companies. So it's just scaling. It's essentially a whole nother business revenue model, you know, for these organized crime groups. And they're going after some of the largest companies in the world now because they're having that much success.
If you were consulting, as I assume you do, to some of these big companies, and a company, let's say United Health, is subject to an attack, or Ticketmaster or whomever, and they face a ransomware, what would you tell them to do? Pay it?
You know, it's such a tough decision when you're in these organizations. I mean, some of them, you know, if they don't pay it, they're completely going out of business. I mean, I've been in meetings before where I've had the CEO break down, cry because they have to pay a ransom because their business is literally going to go out of business if they don't. And in other cases, you know, you may be able to actually recover, and it's a painful process during that period of time. You look at what MGM was able to do. You know, they experienced over $110 million worth of damage, but did not pay the ransom. Whereas Caesars paid, you know, $15 million for the ransom because it was the easiest way to recover. You know, my advice is, based on the situation, you know, is always to not pay the ransom if at all possible. But again, if the business can't operate, they're going to go out of business if they don't. Sometimes the only option is, unfortunately, to pay the ransom.
Does this mean that cybersecurity is not working? What do we know about the cyber defenses that each of these companies have had in place prior to the event?
You know, listen, these companies have full-fledged cybersecurity programs, but the issue that you run into is scale. You know, the larger you are as an organization, the larger your attack surface becomes, you know, more ports and protocols and things, and more services that you use from third parties, cloud providers, which creates these opportunities for these attacks to be successful. It really only takes, you know, one user, for example. If you look at the case of MGM, you know, they're able to use essentially AI voice modulation to remove Russian accents, you know, call up the help desk and then, you know, impersonate somebody. These are, you know, sophisticated attacks, yet very difficult to protect against. It's not that cybersecurity isn't working. It's just the scale of these organizations and companies and how they're kind of modeling how they look at their organization's growth and capacity. Technology, you know, increases complexity within an organization. If they don't have a solid security program based on its foundations, you know, it gets very difficult and challenging for these organizations to really scale their cybersecurity programs, let alone their technology footprint. So is cybersecurity working? Now, I go back to the CISA report that was released this year. Let me read the CISA report, the 2024 CISA report on Microsoft. good. It's actually really good reading. I was actually going to use it for like nighttime, like go to sleep early, but I was like, oh man, this is like this. I got popcorn instead. What was interesting is CISA didn't hold back, and they talked about Microsoft security program. This is not a knock. Microsoft has some of the most brilliant security folks, and they're the largest folks out there from an attack surface perspective. What I found interesting about this is that CISA basically said Microsoft doesn't have fundamental security controls to protect its customers, and it's far behind its competitors, including Amazon and Google, and that its security program is based on its customers notifying them of a security breach. Wow. If you haven't read that, by the way, it's nightmare juice, right? Because most of our infrastructure is obviously Microsoft. And that report, what was interesting about it is it was talking about a breach that happened in 2023 where allegedly Chinese hackers broke into Microsoft's infrastructure, were able to get access to essentially the root certificates and then access any Microsoft tenant, period, anyone they wanted to. I think there was 57 of them that were accessed, very specific and opportunistic off of who they were targeting, but let alone a 0-day targeting Microsoft. And the reason they discovered it is one of their customers had a good security program and said, hey, I think you guys are breached. So like, oh, yeah, we're breached. Okay, let's find out what's going on. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for the heads up. Awesome. Then they released a blog post saying, hey, we found out how the root cause of this happened. CISA said, no. You still don't know the root cause of why this happened. That blog's not right. And so they had to retract that blog. And still to this day, we don't know exactly how they got access to the root certificates of Microsoft. We still don't know. Might have gotten them out. Who knows? We're good. So even companies like Microsoft are having trouble scaling. I'm just going to give you an example here. We recently released a new Microsoft ADCS attack, and the disclosure process was a little bit botched on accident. By the way, I apologize for that. Someone leaked it out ahead of time. We were working with Microsoft to get it fixed, and then another company that we were partnering with or working with to get out to some of the tools released it early, which Microsoft's like, hey, never mind. Okay, I guess we're going to patch it eventually. But anyways, what was interesting about this one of our consultants, Justin Bollinger, found a way to be able to provision basically on almost every single instance of Microsoft's internal ADCS servers, provision any type of root certificate for anybody you want to, a user account, a machine account, whatever you wanted to. And what was interesting about this is that we were using it for 6 months on red team engagements undetected, no problem, right? And we obviously didn't have to disclose it. We did. We were working through the disclosure process. We were going through it. But the fragility of our security programs are based off of things that we hope that we know are there. Our TTPs, our tactics, techniques, and procedures, are previously breached data that we're hoping the attackers are using. And we don't focus on the things that make it difficult for attackers to actually succeed. And what I mean by that is user behavior analytics and looking at how organizations work. If you like the law bin stuff, the living off the land binaries and scripts, the first thing I would do going into an organization is I would take all my law bins. I would say, if regular user is executing a law bin, then trigger an oh shit alarm. And yes, you're going to have some differences there, some false positives. Okay, whitelist those out, and then look for deviations of patterns of behavior there. Any execution period of that process being created from a regular user account. Easy peasy, done in like 2 days. Understanding your environment of, hey, this user does this normally, this user does this normally, these accounts normally access these systems, these accounts don't. Those are the things that make it much more difficult for attackers to get in. And that's the creativity that we have to think about. When I look at going into an organization and I go into an organization, they have a default EDR product in there, I know I'm going to be successful. But if I go into an organization and they've built detections that are based off of their own environment, that are unique to them, it's a minefield for me on the offense. I have no idea if I step to the right, if I'm going to hit a landmine. And those are the creative things that we can do that don't require long-term security programs, do they? To push out a detection should take minutes, hours, a day, not a week, not 2 weeks, not 5 weeks. We shouldn't have to go through a change control board or a change advisory board or anything else to go through and push these specific detections out. These are things that we should move very fast. And so one of our greatest strengths in this industry is our creativity and doing something different that hasn't been done before. And when you look at the creativity that we have, some of the biggest customers that we've gone against the reason why we get detected is because of the creativity of an individual person. There was an assessment that we were doing recently, and it was an organization, a financial institution. And we have an internal C2 that still to this day is not detected called Scoutmaster. We have an R&D team that builds this out. And Scoutmaster uses a undocumented deserialization technique to get remote code execution onto a system. And the customer was less caring about the method we got for initial access, more so were they able to detect us when we're actually in their environment. And so we found a 0-day, one of the third-party applications. We were probing one of the sales folks and did a pretext. We were able to kind of map out what software they had on there. We found a 0-day, used that to compromise this individual, got remote code execution onto the system. Now we're on the network, right? We had circumvented all of their detections. We had circumvented all of their preventative mechanisms. Now we were there. We were this awesome hacking group. We're all celebrating in the chat room, right? We're the best, you know, red team. Yeah. Blue team sucks. No offense. Like, I'm blue team as well. So I'm both. I just switch hats. At this time, blue team sucked. But like literally 7 minutes later, our shell died. Like, well, that's weird. Well, maybe we have a bug in our program. So we're taking a look at it, seeing what's going on. Nope, everything's good. Just not calling back. Get a call from the customer like, hey, are you folks on this machine here? We're like, what? Like 7 minutes? How did you, like, how's that even possible? Like, what did you do to detect us? You have some like crazy hook that does this and this. No. We just, literally, we just mapped out users based on their job position, whether they're technical or non-technical. And if we see technical commands being executed on non-technical computers, then we flag that as a high severity and we investigate what's actually happening on there. We found you folks on that. And I'm like, really? That's it? A 0-day, the undocumented C2, like no detection whatsoever. And we got snagged because we're executing technical commands on a non-technical computer. Really? That easy? But it was one person that thought up that idea that literally saved them from a specific attack that we're doing. The creativity in this industry makes us extremely powerful and flips the scripts. So I'm going to wrap up here and talk about 5 things that are key to success in this industry and to you. These are things that have helped me out as I have progressed in my career and things that hopefully you can take back with you. 1, just do it. Don't think about it. If it's a new career change, do it. Starting your own business, do it. I had no idea what the hell I was doing with Trusted Sec or Binary Defense. No, I still don't. I still don't know what I'm doing. Let me just put that out there. But you learn as you go along. I had no idea how to register an LLC. I'll tell you a funny story. Our MSAs, our statements of work that had our MSAs in it, I didn't have a lawyer. So I was like, well, I'll just find on Google like an MSA. Sure, that's legit because that's what everybody does, right? So I found this MSA online. Great. And that was in all of our statements of work for like a year. And one of our customers, US based, was like, hey, all the legal protections and everything in here is for EU based law. Is that what you wanted? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's sorry, that's for our EU customers. Let me just change that out real quick. No problem. You know, register an LLC, like Google how to register an LLC. You get the first site, you pay $150 and then they register your LLC for you. Like, you know, you learn as you go along, but here's the thing. When I'm talking about doing it, it's about understanding that there are no limitations for you in this industry. You can be anything you want to be as long as you go and you actually do it. So if that's going out and building a new tool, sharing that knowledge, or doing a blog, do it. Don't sit there and wait or think about it or anything else. If it's going to a new job or a new career change or bridging over, I'll tell you a story of an individual that we hired. His name is Luke. We got a contact us form at Trusted Sec. You can go on the contact us form, and it goes to my marketing team, but it also goes to me as well because I'm curious on who's contacting us, new leads, people that want to reach out or things like that. And there was an individual that reached out, and she had said, hey, I'm getting married. My fiance is a web developer, but he loves Trusted Sec and he loves cybersecurity. Would you mind, having somebody from Trusted Sec speak to him just about how we can bridge over and come over to cybersecurity? It'd be a huge honor for him, and it's going to be a surprise for him and everything else. So I responded back and I said, sure, why not? Let's do a quick Zoom call. I'll talk to Luke, talk to him about coming over to cybersecurity and see what's going on. And so we surprised Luke, and Luke was like super nervous and couldn't believe it. And his future wife had set up this whole surprise for him. And I started talking to Luke, and I can tell that this kid was different, super passionate, loved web apps, was doing CTFs, was doing hack in the boxes because he loved cybersecurity. He made it his hobby. And I was like, Luke, you seem pretty smart. I'm going to introduce you to our head of application security. And all of a sudden now Luke's 3 years in, senior security consultant over at Trusted Sec. Cool story because he went and he wanted to do it, and he just had his mindset on doing something and was able to accomplish and do it, and obviously had a path to go and do it. Number 2, surround yourself with positive people who want you to succeed. That's the worst if you have negative people around you all the time. I don't have time for any of that. If you notice me on social media, it's like dog pictures and cat pictures and me working out and, you know, DeLoreans and things like that. I just post positive stuff for positive vibes. I hang around positive people that do positive things. I help people that I want them to succeed, and I hang around people that want me to succeed. Surround yourself with people that want you to succeed. Cut out people that don't want you to succeed. Don't even worry about them. It's not even part of your time. We live in this life it's a very small amount of time around this life. Help and work out with people that want to make you succeed as well. Learn from other people, and being humble, one of the most amazing things that can happen. I'm a huge advocate and believer that good karma creates good karma. If you're a positive force, you're positively charged, you will help other people, and that will in turn come back to you as well. But helping other people and learning from other people, I learned from so many folks. I mean, I see, there was a talk that was at Black Hat recently, and it was on, was it Sam? I think Sammy did it on basically using lasers to inject keystrokes into keyboards. Man, that was if you haven't seen it, what an inspiring video. He's like, hey, man, I don't know enough about this. I need to learn physics. So I'm going to go learn physics. So he goes and he learns physics. And he's like, well, now I know physics, but I need to know like commercial grade, medical grade glass to be able to shove the atoms to go and do this. I'm like, really? Like, you just like, here, I need to learn atoms in physics. Like, that's crazy, right? But that's so cool because he wanted to learn, but he learned from other people to build his knowledge to do something unique that had never been done before. Amazing. That's what this industry is about. Always doing the right thing, always working together, always helping others, and sharing your experiences. Your experiences in this room, every single person here has a unique experience and nobody else has. Doesn't matter what that is, but it's unique. It's different. Your path in your career, your trajectory, whether you've been in this industry for 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, 5 years, just getting in, is completely different. Share those experiences with others. It is valuable. If there is something that was very difficult for you to do or overcome, you can literally share that experience so the next person that has to go through that doesn't have that same difficulty. And that's how you build relationships, friends, and help others. Last but not least, do epic shit. You aren't normal. I don't want to be normal. None of us here are normal, right? We're all in this industry trying to figure out, and we all have a mission to make the world a safer place. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, our mission in this industry is to make the world a safer place. If that's our mission, and we need to be different because everything that's been done before isn't necessarily working all the time, we have to get better at what we do. Everybody here can do that. People can change this industry for the better every single day by giving the time, the effort, and sharing their experiences to what they do. And before I get off the stage, I want to leave you with one thing that I did recently about making the world a better place. So just this last year, we launched Bedford High School's K-12 cybersecurity program. So 10th grade to 12th grade cybersecurity is for a not-for-profit, and they're working with different schools now. So Bedford was the first one. Now we're in 10 different states and over 55 schools. Providing cybersecurity curriculum to be able to train that. Now we're trying to get into the government side to get GRGC as well, so that when they go into like SAINTCON and things like that, or Cyber Command, they can have a good level of knowledge here. But Bedford High School, these kids, didn't have a STEM program, no chance of getting into technology. Again, net median income well under the poverty line when it comes to neighborhood, very bad neighborhood, metal detectors everywhere. They canceled school one year, not because of COVID, because there's so much gang violence. They went to work from home, because there are so many like potential altercations, shootings, things like that were happening in this neighborhood. And this is where I grew up at. It's a great area. Actually do love it. And I go there and I teach the kids every month, talking about cybersecurity, things that are going on. And these kids are absolutely brilliant. They're just not given the opportunity to go and do it. So I wanted to share this video really quick with you on something that we just launched at Trusted Sec. Today is a huge day here at Trusted Sec. We just unveiled the cybersecurity program for Bedford High School, 9th through 12th, that Trusted Sec is sponsored.
that will give the students the tools necessary to work in the cybersecurity field, walking off their graduation stage.
This is a huge dream come true for me. It's something that I've always wanted to do since I started Trusted Sec, but it's being able to provide hands-on cybersecurity training through Paradigm Security Ventures to allow these students to have an opportunity to get into cybersecurity. And our intent here is to hire them directly from high school, no college needed, right into cybersecurity internships paid, both at Trusted Sec and Binary Defense, to give these kids an opportunity that they would never had before.
Dave Kennedy has provided opportunities for our students where opportunities previously did not exist, and he's been doing that since 2018. He's a Bedford High School grad. He's already in our Hall of Fame, and we're extraordinarily proud to be able to help him out at some point by providing him the next wave of great cybersecurity professionals.
Really nice to see someone from Medford, come out and do all these great things, really build up himself. It shows me that I can do that too. It gives us a pride.
I will tell you guys, this is great. Like the connections, like how he talks to the students, how much he cares. Like you can just go up to him and talk to him, and it's like everything's so chill.
Now we're able to really impact these kids of providing some of the best hackers and cybersecurity professionals in the world and teaching these kids how to be successful in cybersecurity, not just from a hacker's perspective, but also defense and understanding incident response. And we have that here in Northeast Ohio. We have one of the best cybersecurity companies in the world, literally in Northeast Ohio, and now training some of the next generation of hackers at Bedford High School that, again, would never had that opportunity before.
So the last thing I'll part ways with before I close here is that I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. One of my favorite shows. Everybody's got their own doctor. If you're into Doctor Who, like everybody's like, usually it's like David Tennant. Mine was Matt Smith. I thought he was one of the best doctors, but thank you. Got like one clap. That's perfect. No one else is like, what the hell is Doctor Who? It's like from like the 60s or 50s. Anyways, time machines, things like that. Again, when I started in this industry, it was the beginning chapters of my story, right? And that story was completely unwritten, but I had so many folks around me that were positive, that wanted to see me succeed. I wanted to help others and make this industry drive it forward. Every single person here can do the same. And I'll quote Doctor Who at the end. We're all stories in the end. Just make it a good one. Thank you all very much, SAINTCON. Appreciate it.